It's like that old joke about the army. Join the army, travel the world, meet interesting people, kill them. It's kind of similar but different. Do jiu-jitsu, travel the world, try to kill interesting people, and then befriend them. Hey there, I'm Stephen Kesting, and this is the Strenuous Life Podcast. Good evening, everyone. Today, I'm answering questions from Twitter. On Twitter, I'm at Stephen Kesting, or you go to twitter.com/Stephen Kesting. I'm trying to put out a lot of stuff there, and I'm putting out a lot of little videos with links to my YouTube videos. So it's actually a pretty good screening mechanism, because I put out so many videos, to just watch the shortened version, the highlight video, a less than a 1 minute version on Twitter. If you like it, if you think it's useful, then you can click on the link and head over and watch it on YouTube. So that's probably one of the more useful aspects of following me on Twitter. The other useful aspect of following me on Twitter is I'm currently doing, I did, an AMA, an Ask Me Anything. So I got asked a lot of questions, and I'm going to try and go through them today. First, though, I'm going to go through a question that didn't come from Twitter. It came more from my Instagram, because I posted some photos of me doing cryotherapy. Now, cryotherapy, there are a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can do it with ice, you can do it with water, and you can do it with liquid nitrogen cooled air. Now, I've done cold water baths, I've done cold water showers, I've done ice baths, but this was my first experience of the liquid nitrogen cooled air. Now, you're not going into liquid nitrogen. If you did, you would die. You would not get frozen the way Han Solo got frozen in carbonite. You would die. So what they use is the liquid nitrogen cools the air, and then they use that air to cool your body. And basically, you look like a big battery. You go inside this little tiny chamber, this little barrel. It's got a door on the side of it. You go stand on the inside of it. You're wearing woolen gloves. You're wearing cotton socks. You're in your underwear. They close the door, and they begin cranking up the cold, or cranking down the heat. And your head is sticking up above the level. And, it's not actually that cold. Supposedly, the science here is that it tells your skin's thermoreceptors, which are the little sensor parts of your skin, to tell them that they're really cold. And this then shunts all the blood into your core. And then when you come out, all that blood comes back, and it releases norepinephrine, it releases other compounds. Basically, it's supposed to be an inflammation killer. I was trying this because I've had this persistent case of golfer's elbow. Man, I wish I had tennis elbow, because tennis elbow would be more manly. There's nothing less manly than golf. And to have golfer's elbow, which means that if you hold your arm out, thumb up, it's the bottom part of your elbow that's hurting. Very common in jiu-jitsu, guys. I've been working on this for a year, using various flossing bands, deep tissue massage, topical anti-inflammatories, stretching, hardly doing any upper body work, which really sucked. What else did I do? Oh yeah, cortisone injections a little while ago. So the cortisone knocked it down from about a 8 to a 4. And interestingly, since trying the cryo, it's probably gone from a 4 to a 2, or from a 4 to a 1. So there are a lot of different things that I'm trying. It's hard to isolate it to just to one thing. It's hard to say, yes, cryotherapy cured me, but it might have. It might have been something that helped. At the same time, I've also been doing some cold showers, and those are interesting to do. The easiest way to get started on those, you start in a nice regular warm shower, and you gradually turn the temperature down, down, down. I went through a phase of doing this about a year ago, and I eventually got to the point where I could just walk into a cold shower, and it didn't bother me that much. I was doing it for the anti-inflammation properties, and I was also doing it to try and develop my cold resistance. I spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and I figured, if my body gets used to getting blasted with water just above freezing, then I might develop more cold resistance. Did that work? I think it did. I think it helped. Anyhow, so the cryotherapy, a tentative yes. But the key thing here is that when you get injured, when something's bothering you, if your neck is bothering you, if your shoulder is bothering you, if your elbow is bothering you, then start with the simple things first. Give it some rest. Just give that body part some time to heal. Then try the less expensive less invasive things. I went and bought one of those compression bands for the forearm, which helped a little bit. I would tape my forearm, put a tight band around my forearm with kinesio tape, which is kind of an elastic sports tape to provide some compression. It helped a little bit. Start with the easy things, the reversible things, the not permanent things, and then start working your way into the more obscure things. It's not really good to get cortisone shots. An entire generation of football players has been raised on, oh, your shoulder hurts, let's shoot you full of cortisone again. And it's not good. Eventually that can crash your adrenal system. So you do the low risk, probably low reward things first, conservative treatment, and then you begin to amp it up into the higher risk and the more expensive treatments. So that's where I was getting to with the cryo. After 11 months of not really being able to do pull-ups, it was really beginning to bug me. So tentative yes on the cryo. The point is, just because it worked for me or maybe worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. I know lots of people who've gotten relief from acupuncture. And I've tried acupuncture probably from 15 different acupuncturists, probably 40 or 50 sessions in my life. And the net result of this, goose egg. Absolutely nothing. No effect ever on anything that I've ever done acupuncture for. And I wanted to believe in it. So if there even had been a placebo effect, I would have been a prime candidate for a placebo effect. Zero. Yet, people I know have received great relief from acupuncture. So the point is, you got to try it. And if something's bothering you, if some body part is bothering you, try different things. Try using therapy bands. Try using braces. Try doing various treatment modalities. Start with the less expensive, the less permanent, the more conservative ones first, and then just go through them. Eventually, hopefully, you'll find something that works. So let's move on to the questions that I got during this AMA on Twitter, where I'm at Stefan Kesting. So the first question came from Beastmaster Dar. You're only allowed to train 3 submissions. What are they? My answer was rear naked choke, armbar, and heel hook. That's just for me again. I think if you were only to train 3 submissions, you should probably have something for the upper body and something for the lower body. In real life, in a fight, in a really toughly contested match, you don't know if you're going to be given an upper body opportunity or a lower body opportunity. So let's say you and I are fighting and you're just having no luck at all at attacking my arms, attacking my neck, because I'm a 5th degree black belt in defending arm locks and defending chokes. Your logical thing that you should do is abandon the upper body and go to the legs, and vice versa. If I'm really good at defending legs, attack the legs, attack the legs, attack the legs, go to the back and choke me. So my reasoning here for only being allowed to train 3 submissions is that you should have an upper body game and a lower body game. And in that upper body game, for sure, you should have a choke. Chokes are where it's at when it comes to self-defense. You can be tough enough to not tap to an armbar. You can be tough enough to not tap to a neck crank. You can't be tough enough to not go unconscious when the choke is well and truly on. So regardless of whether you choose a rear naked choke or a guillotine choke, maybe a triangle choke, but I think that's a little bit less applicable. Ideally, you want something that works standing and on the ground. There has to be some kind of choke there. There should probably be some kind of arm lock there. If you're a Kimura specialist, you could very easily substitute the Kimura for the armbar. If you're, there aren't so many Americana specialists, but I would say you'd want to have some kind of arm lock. So probably a straight arm lock, probably the Kimura would be the 2 choices there. Some kind of choke, probably the rear naked choke or the guillotine choke, and some kind of leg lock. The heel hook is by far the most efficient of the leg locks. It can be really hard to ankle lock or knee bar somebody who's significantly bigger than you, but if you apply the heel hook in anger, you're not attacking their whole leg. You're attacking one of its little cruciate ligaments if you put the pressure in the knee, or the fairly small ligaments of the ankle if you're doing more of the new school leg locks and putting pressure into the ankle. And if you really apply the new school leg lock, you'll take out the ankle and the knee. So I think a twisting leg lock for self-defense purposes is pretty much mandatory. Although you could make an argument for a straight ankle lock if you're competing a lot in the IBJJF. You can make an argument for toe holds. Some people are really good at them. You can make an argument for the knee bar. I'm a huge fan of the knee bar as well. So, next question came from Thomas Rain 1. Got any drills that can be done with a grappling dummy? My quick answer was I'm not a huge fan. I've built and bought 3 or 4 of them, and I've always gotten rid of them. It's true. Somewhere in the multiverse is a graveyard of Stefan's grappling dummies. I have bought them. I have built them. I have built different versions, and I've just never found that I've stuck with it, even though I was highly motivated to stick with it, even though I was highly motivated to train. The lack of resistance, the lack of movement, the lack of getting the right energy to do a transition just really didn't interest me. And I'm not alone here, because I would hazard a guess to say that 95% of the people who buy a grappling dummy, who've got the best of intentions, and when they drop $500 on a grappling dummy, they're strongly motivated to use it. Probably 95% of people either never end up using it past the first week or two, it ends up in the closet somewhere, or they end up selling it. And there's also true in martial arts schools. I've been in a lot of martial arts schools where there are a lot of dummies, inanimate grappling dummies, and they're just sitting off in the corner, and people sit on them as they're getting changed, as they're talking, or just hanging out. It's really rare to see people drilling with them. Now, I have known some people who've gotten good value out of grappling dummies. Some people really like them, but they're hugely in the minority. So unless you've got good reason to think that you're going to be one of those people in the minority, don't spend the money. Better to borrow one, better to buy one that you can return, better to find a school that has one and ask if you can rent it. Something where you're not spending a huge ton of coin to find out that you're one of the 95% of people, one of the 19 out of 20 people who never ends up using the damn thing. So I actually think that your time, if you can't find a training partner, is better off spent conditioning, watching YouTube videos, and maybe doing some solo movement drills on the ground. I think that that's probably more efficient for most people. So I wish I had a better answer for you. I would be happy to make grappling dummies and sell them online if I thought that they worked, but in general, I don't think they do. Now, the exception here, the one that I do use, is a wrestling takedown dummy that's mounted on the wall. I don't think they make it anymore, but it's called an Atom takedown dummy. Quite expensive. I got mine secondhand, and even that was easily $1,500 by the time I bought it and paid for shipping. But basically, it's hard to find people who are willing to let you slam into them again and again and again with a single leg, with a double leg especially, to do snap downs. To let them essentially, let you essentially club them on the back of the head until they bend over. That's hard to find somebody willing to do that. And the takedown dummies that are out there, if you do a search for Atom takedown dummy, that I have used. I don't use it all the time, but it's a lot of fun to have. It's a lot of fun to play with occasionally. So that would be the exception to my rule. Bottom line, find it, try it before you buy it. There was a bit of a strange question from Colin_007. Can you tell us a funny story regarding someone on the mat with poor hygiene? I don't think there is such a thing as a funny story about someone on the mats with poor hygiene. Someone on the mats with poor hygiene is just gross. And it really interferes with the class. I think it's an instructor's responsibility to tell Pigpen over there, look, you shower at least 2 hours, if not closer, before coming to class, and your gi gets washed after every class. Your underwear gets washed after every class. Your rash guard gets washed after every class. A lot of people just don't know that. A lot of people do not know that they stink because they smell themselves all the time. So they need to be told, look, before you go to class, take a bloody shower. After class, take another shower and wash everything that you are wearing in the washing machine. So there is no such thing as a funny story about someone on the mat with poor hygiene. Poor hygiene just ends up spreading ringworm and staph across the entire club. And unless you've got somebody at the top who just absolutely does not put up with it and is willing to tell people, go home and do not come back until that ringworm clears up, the whole club is going to be infested all the time. Now, on a tangent, I said that maybe in the podcast I'd go into this. It's not poor hygiene per se, but there's incredibly poor form that I remembered. There was this one guy, this big, strong wrestler, not the most ripped guy in the world. And his one big submission was he'd get on top of the people, he'd open up his gi, this was before everyone wore a rash guard, and he'd basically smush his man boob into your face and try to asphyxiate you by crushing your face in his sweaty, hairy man boob. It was the grossest thing that I had ever seen. And when I rolled with him, fortunately, I saw him do this to other people. Often when I'm rolling and the guy's a lower rank, I'll let him take mount, I'll let him take side mount, and we'll go from there, and I'll try and fight my way out. With this guy, absolutely no chance of that. There's no way I'm ending up on the bottom with this guy. So yeah, he'd open up his gi. He had fairly big pecs, but they were well marbled, and he'd basically smush them down into someone's face, and the people would tap out. They'd be spitting out hair. They'd have, chest hair stuck between their teeth, and they would leave, and they'd never come back to class ever. That guy must have driven off 10 people. My instructor at the time, I think, in retrospect, made a poor decision. This guy paid his dues, but in training, he drove off way more people and cost him way more dues than he would have earned by getting rid of this guy, or at least talking to him. This is not acceptable. Thomas Rain 1 asked, is there a certain jiu-jitsu game that big guys should stay away from? And I don't think so. Now, bigger guys tend not to be as flexible as smaller guys. As a very general rule, there are big, flexible guys, but by and large, bigger guys aren't as flexible as smaller guys. So if you're not flexible, then you should stay away from things that a lot of smaller guys can get away with. Things like rubber guard, things like, a De La Hiva with a foot, where it's all based on leg flexibility, where you just coil that leg in. There are ways to do De La Hiva when you're bigger, but you're doing it with more of a straight leg. You're not doing it based on knee and ankle flexibility. So avoiding the crazy flexibility guard-based games is probably a good idea. But in general, a big guy, if he can move like a small guy, that's a good thing. Take a look at how Buchecha moves. He is a big guy. He moves like a small guy. So if you're a big guy and you can move like a small guy, that's one of the biggest compliments that you can give to somebody. Hey, you move like a small guy. It means that they move smoothly. It means that they move fluidly. And hopefully, when push comes to shove, they can still then go and put weight on the person and use the big guy game. But hopefully they can alternate between the small guy mobility, the small guy fluidity, and the big guy pressure, and use them both. So I don't think there's any downside to staying away from small guy games, given that the basic constraints of flexibility or maybe body morphology work. I mean, if a small guy has got really long legs in relation to his upper body, and you're a big guy, you're 6'6", but you got the same length legs as a small guy, you know what? Spider guard might not be for you. Darija078 asked, takedown or guard pull? I think if you can, go for a takedown. Takedowns are good. Knowing takedowns is an excellent skill. I'm going to release the video that I filmed with Rob Bernacki pretty soon where we talk about takedowns for jiu-jitsu competition. And should you pull guard or should you go for a takedown? But the point form notes are there that if you can go for a takedown, do it. First of all, it's a great self-defense skill to be able to control whether you take somebody to the ground or whether you can prevent them from taking you to the ground. From a tactical point of view in a competition, being able to control or have the option to be on top if you want to be on top is a very good thing. But takedowns are dangerous, and takedowns are a lot of work. And investing hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in your takedown game, which is what it's going to take, when you could be investing that in time on the ground, may not be the best trade-off. Because you get out there, you're all primed for the takedown, the guy pulls guard. Well, maybe you should have been working on your guard passing as well. So I think developing a couple of takedowns that you can use, and then if nothing's happening, you're there, and you got two guys doing bad judo to each other, then pull guard. Or you get out there, you lock up with them, you go, holy crap, this guy knows his judo, or holy crap, this guy moves like a wrestler, or you watch the guys fight the match before, then definitely pull guard. If you think he's better than you are, pull guard. You don't want to lose doing something you're not good at. If he beats you, if his guard pass is better than your very best guard, then he was going to beat you anyway. But if you tried to do something that you weren't good at, and he beats you, then it's your own damn fault. You want to take the match into an area that you're good at and then let the best man win. John Iron Manley asks, just starting in jiu-jitsu, what foundational movements should I focus on in training? And what non-training movements would you recommend focusing on in the gym to build a solid foundation? So those are two very different questions. Foundational movements to focus on in training. Really, those are your rolls, your break falls, your shrimps, and your bridging, and you're combining those different moves. Now, rolling doesn't only mean forward roll. There are forward rolls, there are backward rolls, and there are sideways rolls, sort of a Granby type roll. Break falling, you got forward break falling, sideways break falling, backwards break falling. Shrimping, you got many different variations of shrimping. And bridging, there are a couple different ways that you can do that and link it to shrimping. I don't think you should spend a month training your foundational movements before going to a jiu-jitsu class. But those are the movements that your body has to get good at doing. You can train them two ways. You can train them on their own a little bit, and then you'll end up using them in the techniques. So doing them in the techniques will reinforce your ability to do them on your own. Doing them on your own will reinforce you doing them in the techniques. One really good resource for that is the Brandon Mullins Nonstop Jiu-Jitsu instructional set that we did together, because Volume 1 was called Advanced Applications of Fundamental Movements. So these movements are fundamental, or as you said, foundational. Same thing. Rolling. But you can use rolling a million different ways. You can use rolling if somebody trips you and you roll out of it. You can use rolling to finish a sweep. You can use rolling to attack with a choke. You can use rolling to finish an armbar. You can use shrimping to escape from a position. You can use shrimping to finish a sweep. You can use shrimping or a technical stand-up in a million different ways. So these foundational movements you end up using all the time for your entire jiu-jitsu career for many different applications. So now to the gym. What non-training movements would you recommend focusing on the gym to build a solid foundation? Now, there are a million different training modalities out there. Are you going to do CrossFit? Are you going to do kettlebells? Are you going to do functional band training? Oh, look, there's this new type of Hungarian functional training that involves 2 sandbags of different weight that you light on fire, so you've got a limited time and high incentive to throw them properly, or whatever it is. So, what's a good basic program? There are many basic programs. I think something based on the squat, the deadlift, the pull-up, and some kind of pressing or pushing motion is a really good idea. Basically, I'm not the person who came up with this. Push something off your body, pull something toward your body, and move something heavy with your legs. Also, by working these symmetrical motions, right? You're using your left side of your body, pretty much doing the same thing as the right side of your body. By doing things that require you to have good form in your lower back, not too much lordosis, not too much bending of the spine forward. It teaches you the basics of good biomechanics, staying in good posture, right? Not being all twisted and using your body in an intelligent way. And no matter how long you do jiu-jitsu for, you're going to have to push somebody off of you, you're going to have to pull somebody towards you, and you're going to have to use your legs. Now, once you've learned those basic movements, and again, I would recommend squat, deadlift, pull-up, and presses. By presses, the classic would be the bench press, could be dumbbell presses, could be standing military presses, could be push-ups. That's a really good place to start. Then I also like to add in, for myself, a bit of grip training, ab training, and neck training. I think training your neck helps prevent injury. Training your abs, well, summer's coming. You always want to look good, and it helps stabilize the core. And grip, especially in gi-based jiu-jitsu, you can never have enough of it. So that's the basics of it. Once you get those down, now you can start doing circuits. Now you can start doing kettlebells. Now you can start doing CrossFit. Doesn't really matter. I would come back to those solid foundational movements every once in a while, every week or two, just to make sure that you still have them. And just to focus on that basic, simple, multi-joint strength movement. So, my thoughts on Gracie Combatives and Gracie Garages by Reggie541. I think it's really good so long as there's sparring. I think to learn jiu-jitsu without sparring, as I think some of those facilities do, is a huge mistake. Yes, it opens it up to the masses, but you're also getting rid of the very foundation, the very core of what made jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so much more effective than old school Japanese jiu-jitsu. Old school Japanese jiu-jitsu had tons of rehearsed kata or rehearsed scenarios. You step forward, you grab my imaginary top knot, I grab your wrists, I step to the back, I do an armpit armbar on you and you tap out. And then I do it to you and you repeat it. And then we do the second movement in which I grab you by the lapel and then you reach over and you put me in a wrist lock. By not including sparring, the jiu-jitsu essentially becomes a form of kata. There are lots of good techniques in those curricula, but unless you're training it against resistance, I think you're really doing yourself a huge disservice as a martial artist. Also, a lot of the fun in jiu-jitsu is in the sparring. A lot of it's trying to try it for real and getting your hopes and dreams and your soul crushed as your opponent just laughs at your technique and blows past it. And you don't get the real feedback from the universe. You don't get feedback from the universe that your technique sucks. So I'm not that familiar with the Gracie combatives and the Gracie Garage program, but I do know that some of the programs out there, some of the people doing those programs don't have sparring. I don't think that that's the right way. I think the techniques that they focus on, it seems like to me, it's a very reasonable starting point for which techniques you should learn. And I think having a progression of techniques is a great idea in general. The next 3 questions come from Flybrand. I don't know how you can squeeze 3 questions into a Twitter tweet, but he manages to do it. Question 1, what's the worst injury or handicap you saw someone overcome to keep training jiu-jitsu? What's something jiu-jitsu could do to make it easier for others to start? And what's your biggest red flag when you train somewhere new? All right, so the worst handicap or injury I've seen someone overcome. I think it's hard to pick somebody more inspirational than Kyle Maynard. So he's a quadruple amputee who has fought MMA, who has trained jiu-jitsu, and has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro by crawling up Mount Kilimanjaro. So any other people coming back from ACL surgery or any other kind of injury just pales in comparison to that. Another amazing person to look up is Anthony Robles. Dude was born with one leg and absolutely massacred tons of wrestlers, fully able-bodied wrestlers. He was a 3-time All-American. He won the Pac-10. If you watch footage of him wrestling at 125 pounds, it's crazy. Dude's got one leg. Dude is destroying guys with 2 legs, an entire body. And so once again, it's not jiu-jitsu. Be interesting to see if he ever did jiu-jitsu. I don't think he has. But if you take a look at the challenges that these people have overcome, I don't think anything else that we see at the gym on a day-to-day basis compares. Next question was, what could jiu-jitsu do to make it easier for others to start? I think giving people who start the big picture, like the overall picture of what are we doing here on the ground, what are the basic positions, and what are you going to learn? What is the progression of techniques that you need to learn in order to get better at jiu-jitsu? This is essentially why I wrote that Roadmap to BJJ book that's still available completely for free. If you do a search for it, you'll find it, or you can get it at grapplearts.com/book. And it's talking about the core positions of jiu-jitsu, which positions are better and why some are better than others. Why is mount better than side mount? Why is the back better than mount? Why is it better to be on top than on bottom? Why is the point system based the way it is? What is your overall strategy in a fight? What are the basic techniques from every position? We take it, once we've been training for a while, for granted, but this isn't obvious. When somebody starts, they're very, very confused by this mass of arms and legs and people rolling around on the ground, and all of a sudden, for no reason, somebody taps. People don't understand. So if you were to give them sort of the view from 30,000 feet before they actually stepped on the mat, I think that would really help. And my biggest red flag when I train somewhere new, I think it's people not taking care of each other on the mat. I think it's people not looking out for each other and demonstrating that they care more about their training partner than they do about getting the tap. If you go somewhere and there are people, dude, I popped your capsule, man, or cranking heel hooks or cranking arm bars, auto out. Absolutely not going to happen. Also, the head instructor just dripping with ego. It's pretty easy to see after you've spent a lot of time in martial arts when the head instructor can't laugh at himself, always takes himself super seriously, isn't open to questions, requires a way too much kowtowing and, I deserve respect because I've got this black belt and this title of professor. I'm out. I don't like that. That is not what I'm attracted to martial arts for. So those are my big red flags that I'm looking for. What's your opinion on how grading should work? My school charges extra money getting ready for gradings. I'm leaving out the name here because I don't want you to get in trouble at your school. I think, and I'm in the minority here, that gradings should be free. I think you're paying tons of money to take the classes. Jiu-jitsu is not cheap compared to other martial arts. You're paying for gis, you're paying for physiotherapy, to then get dinged with a $30, $60, $50, or $100 fee every time you get a promotion. It's just a money grab. I remember I used to train at a place, and every time the instructor was about to go on holiday, all the students would start showing up and train for a month solid before the instructor went away on holidays. You know why? Because they knew that before he went away on holidays, he would do a big promotion. And during that big promotion, he would give out lots of belts and charge lots of money so that he would have money to pay for the holiday. So I'm probably in the minority here. I don't think schools should charge money. If you go to university, you pay lots of money for university. You're not paying an extra $10,000 to go to graduation. How do I deal with a strong novice in class who gets the guard and then just hugs with all their strength? This is Brian Tinsman. That's a good question. And you know what? It's not just novices. It's also intermediates. It's also advanced people in tournament who've gotten ahead on points and are just trying to stall. So with regards to beginners, you got to do some education. Look, man, we're training here. You got to open your legs. You got to play the game. You got to try to attack. You got to try and advance your position. It's not just about stalling. But if you do have a tough closed guard, or you're facing a tough closed guard, you do need answers to this. So it's actually a great opportunity to practice breaking tough closed guards. And to do that, I almost always stand up. If you stand up, then you've got gravity on your side. You're pushing him down, gravity's pulling him down, and that's a lot of weight on the ankles. You can do a few other things to make him open his legs, but against a tough closed guard, I try to break the grips on my head and then try and stand up. High Grade asks, what kind of guards would you recommend using or learning when punches are involved? I think there are two places that you want to start here. Closed guard with a lot of posture control, focusing a lot on the overhook. You have the overhook regardless of the guy is wearing a gi or not. If you're fighting a guy and he's wearing a winter jacket or a leather coat or a hoodie, great, you can totally go to the collar and sleeve guard. But ideally you want something that's going to work gi and no gi, hoodie or no hoodie, winter jacket or t-shirt. So a closed guard, focusing a lot on one hand with the overhook and the other hand controlling the head, and also the standard open guard. You see this in MMA all the time. Why? Because it works, which is with both feet on the hips and then trying to control maybe a leg with your hand, controlling a wrist with your hand, or if you've got strong grips, both wrists with your hands. So those would be the two places that you want to start. Lucas Sharpf asks, how can I do a tight guillotine without putting pressure on the spine? Well, to do a guillotine without putting any pressure on the spine is really tough. In fact, if you're doing a guillotine, you want to put pressure on the spine, because if you bend the spine out of position, if you twist it or bend it or kink it, you're reducing his strength. You're reducing his ability to resist. Think of it this way. If you're doing a squat, like a squat with a barbell on your shoulders, you want to have your spine in good alignment. You want to be looking at least straight ahead or maybe even a little bit up. That's to keep your head up and to keep your spine in a strong alignment. Try doing a squat with your chin touch. You hear my voice change as I'm doing it here in front of the microphone. With your chin dropped down to your chest, and then put your ear over to your shoulder too, and just twist your head up. Then try and do a squat. Good luck. You're going to lose 50 pounds, or you're probably going to drop the damn weight over your neck and hurt yourself. So you do actually want to twist the guy's spine or bend the guy's spine a little bit as you do a guillotine. Now, if you're looking for a guillotine that puts the least pressure on the spine, probably the Marcellitine, where you put one hand under the chin, you grab your fist, and you throw that elbow over your shoulder. If you do a search for Marcellitine, then you'll find it right away. And that's a very trachea-dominant attack. It's putting a lot of pressure on the windpipe. So that's probably the guillotine that I would go to. But it's still going to put some pressure on the spine. I don't think there's any way around it. Half Empty 621. Do you feel current rule sets are starting to make jiu-jitsu less effective by having no slamming, allowing guard pulling, and no reaping? Yes and no. If we were just training for combat, we would have things like slamming. We would penalize guard pulling, and we wouldn't allow reaping, and we'd also allow punching in the face. And now we essentially have MMA. So if you want the most effective jiu-jitsu, it's really MMA. Because as soon as you start getting punched in the face, it changes everything. However, that's a lot less safe than what we do. And that means less people are going to be able to do it, and it means your injury rate's going to be way higher. So something like slamming, you should know what to do when the guy stands up and you've got closed guard. And you should know about slamming from the top and the bottom. But the potential there for really hurting somebody is really high. I mean, you can concuss the crap out of somebody. I've seen people get knocked, well, there's been lots of people who have been knocked out from getting slammed. And I really think that the risk to reward benefit there is pretty off. It's not in favor of training it for the recreational player. So I think there are some rules that, yeah, it would make it more combatively effective, but it'd be so much more dangerous that it would limit your ability to train it effectively. I mean, you could also make the argument that eye gouging and finger biting would also make it more combative. But again, you wouldn't be able to train very much. So training, getting really good at the slightly safer techniques makes you a more efficient combat athlete or more effective combat athlete in the long run than training the things or then including the things that are really difficult to train safely. That being said, I've ranted about the leg reaping rule before. I don't think there's any evidence to show that leg reaping in itself, sans a heel hook, presents any real danger to the leg. And I think that not having leg reaping does actually hurt jiu-jitsu. But you know what? It promotes beautiful open guard work, which might be the real point of that rule. To not just have have somebody pull in to the open guard and be working some kind of upside down, inside out, reverse de la Hiva, all that goes out the window when the guy drops back to an ankle lock and taps the guy out. So in all my experience, asks Graham MC76, in all my experience, can I pinpoint one detail, concept, or technique which was the biggest game changer in jiu-jitsu for me? That's a really interesting question because, of course, there have been many concepts that have changed my jiu-jitsu. And the question is detail, concept, or technique. I'm going to stick with concept. I'm going to change your question to what's the biggest concept, because jiu-jitsu really does come from the concepts. I'd say for me, the importance of grip fighting, the critical importance of grip fighting really had the biggest effect over the shortest period of time. When it finally clicked, when I finally watched the high-level guys grip fight, get the grips they want, attack. Or if they're passing the guard, grip fight, get the grip they want, pass. Something really clicked. And so, for example, if I haven't been training that much and I'm going against a good opponent, a guy who can, that I hang neck and neck with when we're both sharp and we've both been training a lot. Now I'm going against him and I haven't been training as much. I'm coming back from an injury or something. I will focus like crazy on grip fighting because as long as I control the grip, it's hard for him to do anything too terrible to me too quickly. So I'll go with the grip fighting. But there have been many other concepts that have really helped me. And my biggest changes in the game have been conceptual. Realizing that, this is just like all those other techniques. All these techniques are basically the same expression of this one principle or this other principle. All right, Spinning Axe Kick asks, why can't I ever finish a single leg? This is a really hard question to answer over Twitter because I can't see your single leg. I can't see what you're doing wrong. That being said, I'll tell you a story. I was sparring with a guy who had been on the Canadian national wrestling team. He probably would have gone to the Olympics if the Soviet Union hadn't invaded Afghanistan. Canada and the United States, a bunch of other countries ended up boycotting those Olympics. He said, screw this, left the game of wrestling, went into rugby, became a world-class rugby guy. Not surprisingly, those two sports have a lot in common. So we were sparring, stand-up sparring, and he caught me in a single leg and did what's called running the pipe, where you basically hug the leg, you put your head in the guy's chest, you take a step backwards, you bow forward, you put head pressure I'm trying to describe this over the airwaves here. That's a bit tough. Anyhow, running the pipe. He did that and took me down. I was like, oh, okay. So we kept on sparring. He grabbed the single leg again. He started running the pipe. And I was like, I knew what he was going to do. And he still took me down. And then we kept on going. Now I'm absolutely determined to not let him run the pipe. And of course, he grabs it and runs the pipe. And I go and I study counters to running the pipe, and he runs the pipe. So it was just a really good lesson that having a single really good finish that you believe in and that you're very good at can answer many of your problems. You don't need 10 different finishes to a single leg. You need one super deadly one. I think running the pipe's a great one. Just remember to use your head to push the guy's body sideways. Just if it's not working, push more with your head. And then any of the other counters that you learned, come off of that. It's like the jab. It's like the jab and the cross because it has knockout power and it also elicits good responses that you can respond to. That is an awesome sentence that I should quote myself on Instagram for. Pretty inspirational, I think. How much can I deadlift? Iowa Skylar wants to know. The deadlift was never my lift. I was always a better squatter than I was a deadlifter. The most I ever squatted at a body weight of about 210 was 405. That's 4 plates aside. That's pretty good for a guy who's not doing, full-time powerlifting or full-time in the gym. In terms of deadlifting, I don't max out that much these days because I'm doing a ton of cardio. I'm trying to get ready for another 50K endurance march in a couple of weeks. So doing deadlifts to failure right now would be absolutely the wrong thing. With a straight bar, I think I maxed out in the mid 300s. That was a few years ago. I think it was mid 300s. Nowadays when I deadlift, I mostly use the hex bar, which is a lot easier to lift with than the straight bar. The hex bar, you're basically holding the weight on the sides of your legs, as opposed to the straight bar where you're basically pulling the bar up your shins. Also think the hex bar deadlift is kind of a combination squat deadlift. But again, I'm not doing it for maximum weight right now. I'm doing it as a little adjunct to the cardio that I have to do in order to get ready for this attempted 50-kilometer death march. Cutter 188 or 1888 asks, do I eat before training or on an empty stomach? I think he wants to say, am I training after eating or do I train on an empty stomach? I usually like a small meal, 60 minutes before if I can get it. For me, one thing that works great is whole wheat toast and almond butter. It's got just enough fat, just enough fiber. It's not so heavy in the stomach that it just sits there like a lump. The very first time I ever threw up in training, it was when I thought that 3 small pork chops, half hour before working out was a good idea. Yeah, so I did end up running over to the waste paper basket and relieving myself of those pork chops in fairly short order. So don't eat anything too heavy. I like eating a little something before training. Blind Man Brad asks, if you attend a jiu-jitsu class that doesn't roll or has limited rolling time, what do you do to make the most of time rolling? Well, you roll as best as you can. You try and have a focus to your training. But you clearly are recognizing the importance of rolling. So I say do some extra rolling before class if you can. Show up early, get some rolling in. Do some rolling after class. Stay late and do some extra rolling. Or make some extra time during the week. Meet up with a training partner and do some extra rolling. If you're a good training partner, then this is pretty easy to do. If you're a crappy training partner, people don't like training with you, then they're not going to make the extra time to meet up with you and do additional training. But if you are a training partner who's, washes and isn't too spastic and doesn't hurt people and is a good drilling partner, it's usually not too hard to find somebody else who's got some time to either meet up at the club or find a judo club or find a fitness club that's got some mats or spend the $200-300 to get some puzzle mats for one of your houses and do some additional rolling. John Iron Manley asks, what jiu-jitsu moves are most vital to realistic self-defense, assuming that I have no desire to compete and just want to use it against attackers in real-life scenarios? I wish I had a fancy answer for you, but it really is the basics. These are the moves on the couple of pages on the checklist of the Roadmap for Jiu-Jitsu book that I referenced earlier, grapplearts.com/book. completely free. So it's moves like the upa escape from mount. It's moves like the hip escape from side control. It's moves like the kimura from close guard. It's moves like the rear naked choke from rear mount. It's moves like the armbar from mount, the armbar from guard, the armbar from side mount. The basics. If you know all those basic moves, and they're really only 30 or 40 or 50 basic moves, and you know the transitions between the major positions, then you're way ahead for self-defense. So I don't have a fancy answer for you. It's basic jiu-jitsu. It's fundamental jiu-jitsu. Parker Now asks, you're a fireman, right? Does jiu-jitsu help you with your work in any way? First of all, Parker, I find the term fireman terribly, terribly offensive. I am a firefighter. Man is so cis, hetero, patriarchal, Anglo-Saxon that I'm truly, truly troubled. I am a firefighter. Does it help? Of course it helps. It helps in a couple really obvious ways. Number one is fitness. A high level of fitness in both endeavors, jiu-jitsu, firefighting, are really important. And the second is also really important in both endeavors, is staying calm, or sort of calm, under pressure. If I'm on the bottom of mount and you've got a cross face, you're grinding your shoulder in my face and you're fishing for a sleeve choke, it does me no good to panic. I may not get out, but unless I stay calm, I'm for sure not going to get out. If I stay calm and do the right thing, I might get out. Same thing. Pull up at a big house fire, say I'm in command of the fire. If I panic, we're going to lose the house. If I don't panic, if I stay calm-ish, then we may save it. So staying calm is the only thing that's going to help you. So I think those are the two biggest commonalities between the two endeavors, although I would say, I don't think one helps the other, but both also have sort of a locker room culture or a very team-based culture. If you're going to jiu-jitsu and you don't have any friends there, you don't have training partners and people you actually like, you're not going to get good at jiu-jitsu. And again, if you do firefighting, you don't have any friends there, you're probably not going to enjoy your career as a firefighter. Catch Wrestling asks, do I think toe holds and neck cranks will become go-to moves over heel hooks in competitive grappling? EBI just had a lot of neck attacks recently. I think it's possible. I think that whenever the sport focuses on a certain kind of submission, originally there were a lot of focus, say, on arm bars and triangles. And then people get wise to that and they adapt their game to make it more difficult to get arm barred and triangled. Say they pass the guard standing up. That opens up the lower body game, right? If everyone's super good at and super aware of arm bars and triangles, then you can attack the legs. As they start defending the legs, then you start going to something else. So certainly I think toe holds and neck cranks, we might be seeing a lot more of them. But I think the heel hook is such a deadly move, like what I talked about earlier. I'm big. I'm 210 pounds. I got big legs. But if you're a 140-pound guy and you know what to do, you could tear my ACL like nothing. You could explode my ankle with a heel hook. It's because no matter how big my legs get, those ligaments, those tendons, they don't get larger in proportion with the rest of my body. So you can put your whole entire body against one of my little ligaments, against some tendon attachments, and kapop, it's going to pop. So I think the heel hook, especially the reverse heel hook, requires so little force and do so much damage that they're the great equalizer, and I think that they're going to stick around for a very long time, especially in no-gi. Especially in no-gi where they allow heel hooks and where they allow reaping. CK Luda 2323 asks, what's my opinion on cross-training? I don't really know what you're asking here, Chris, because do you mean cross-training between wrestling and jiu-jitsu, between judo and jiu-jitsu, between sambo and jiu-jitsu, between wrestling and judo? I think it's great. I think the more cross-training you do between martial arts, the better. It makes you a more well-rounded martial artist and it'll help you. In fact, I think there's benefits if you have the time and you have the energy to cross-train between boxing and jiu-jitsu. It'll make your self-defense much better. Now, if you're getting ready to compete in the mundials or you're getting ready to compete at the local no-gi submission tournament, you should focus on your no-gi submission for a while. you should train the way you're going to fight. But then when you go back to regular maintenance training, yeah, I think cross-training is better. Now, I don't know if you meant cross-training with fitness and jiu-jitsu as well, like doing some running, doing some weightlifting, and doing jiu-jitsu. Again, I think it's a great thing. Jiu-jitsu is such a variable activity. Sometimes you're going as hard as you can and it's a strength thing. Sometimes you're going for a long time and it's an endurance thing. Sometimes it's an upper body thing. Sometimes it's a lower body thing. It's really hard to predict exactly what skills you're going to need and what attributes you're going to need. So the wider a range of physical things that you're good at, the better. You'll find a way to use it. So I'm a big fan of cross-training. And in fact, this is related to the next question, which is what to do when you're out of state. Do you think training at different jiu-jitsu schools will make you better? Absolutely. Train at as many different schools as you can. The more different places you train at, the more different techniques you'll learn, the more different approaches to training you'll get, the different drills you'll pick up. Maybe your school, you'll figure out, well, wait a second, everyone at my school passes the guard on the knees. But I went to this other school, and everyone was passing the guard standing up. Everyone was passing the guard standing up. And you'd recognize this huge hole in your game. So having that experience, training at a different school, you realize that, oh, wait a second, I've got this huge myopia. Nobody at my school berimbolos. Everyone at this other school berimbolos. Everyone at my school plays De La Hiva guard. So I've forgotten how to open the basic close guard. But then I went to the school and everyone is a close guard monster. So it's a good wake-up call about what you need to work on, what areas of your game you need to work on. There are a couple other benefits as well. It gives you a sense of where you are in the grand hierarchy of things. If you're a blue belt and you've only ever trained at one school, you don't know where you fit on the grand scheme of blue belts. If you go to another school and you're kicking the asses of purple belts and just destroying all the blue belts, well, then you know where your school fits in. You know where your rank is. You know that you're pretty good. And the exact opposite thing can also happen. You might think that you're the biggest, baddest guy at your club. You're a purple belt. And you can pretty much crush everybody. And you go to some other school and you get manhandled by the blue belts. Well, maybe you shouldn't take your own rank that seriously and just double down on your training and just continue to get really good and try and lift the level of everybody else at the club up. And finally, a really good reason to train at different jiu-jitsu schools is most jiu-jitsu schools are really welcoming to people coming from out of town, coming from different clubs, and it can end up being a fantastic experience. It's a fantastic way to meet people. Yeah, you can meet people by running into them on the street and having a conversation with them. But then if you say, hey, do you want to go get a beer? People are going to look at you pretty strange. But after going through a jiu-jitsu class and just grinding your face into somebody's chest and then almost breaking their arm and sweating and fighting and straining and fighting and straining, you make friendships pretty quickly. And then going for food after that is a pretty natural extension. So you can actually develop some pretty good friendships and pretty good relationships all over the world by first trying to crush people. It's like that old joke about the army. Join the army, travel the world, meet interesting people, kill them. It's kind of similar but different. Do jiu-jitsu, travel the world, try to kill interesting people, and then befriend them. So I think that's where I'll leave it today. If you're interested in following me on Twitter, go to @StephenKesting. Like I said, I'm trying to do a fair amount of stuff there. I am still trying to figure out Twitter, so if you've got some tips there or some requests, always a good place to put it. All right, take care. Good luck with your training, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. Podcast listeners, if you're listening, there's a good chance that you're into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I hope that you are. It's the best martial art out there. But nevertheless, if you do Jiu-Jitsu, if you do grappling, if you do MMA, I've got a book out there. It's called A Roadmap to BJJ, and it covers the fundamentals of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It covers the techniques and the positions. It's got checklists. It's a super useful resource, and it's completely free. If you go to grapplearts.com/book, you can download it. It's also on Amazon Kindle where you can buy it if you want to go that way, but I'm going to suggest the free route, which is grapplearts.com/book. Check it out. I get feedback almost every day from people who found this super useful in finally getting through and understanding the ground game, and it finally making sense for them, and it finally not being so intimidating anymore. Check it out. I think you'll find it really useful too.